You have to understand, Maggie was always a little obsessed with money, even back when we had nothing. Some people just can't be happy for you. That's my best friend of 22 years, saying my name into a microphone. At the grand opening of a business that began with a store my money helped launch. 200 people in that room, a banner with her name on it in 3-foot letters, and my name in her mouth in front of all of them as the cautionary tale. The jealous one, the small one, the friend who kept a tally. Somebody near the front said, "Aw." Somebody raised a glass to her. I was standing at the back, by the gift table, holding the orchid I'd brought her. And I didn't step forward. I didn't shout across that room that the money which got her first store off the ground came out of my checking account, in pieces, at 2 a.m. on the worst nights of her life. I didn't pull out my phone and start reading dates and amounts. I just set my glass down, very quietly, and picked my orchid back up off that table. A few people in that room knew enough to look away, and every one of them was braced for me to break, to cry, to walk out, to do the thing the jealous friend in her story would obviously do and prove her right in front of everybody. A woman beside me leaned in and whispered, "Is she talking about you?" And I said, "She is. And she's the only person in this room who knows she's lying." Now, I know exactly how that sounds. The bitter old friend, certain she's the wronged one. Every room has one of those, and everyone in that room had just been told I was it. But here is what nobody in that room knew. Not the 200 people applauding, not the woman beside me, and least of all Sharon, standing up there under her own name. 15 years ago, on the worst night of her life, Sharon Petrakis wrote something down in her own handwriting and mailed it to me. For 15 years, I never showed it to anyone. I never used it. I never even mentioned it, not until the night I'm telling you about. It was in my purse, 9 feet from where she was standing, and by the end of that night, the woman who could talk her way out of anything wasn't going to be able to say a single word. My name is Maggie Dunmore, and to understand what was in that purse, I have to take you back 15 years, to a bathroom floor at 3 a.m, and the first night I ever gave Sharon Petrakis money. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. I met Sharon Petrakis 22 years ago, at a playground, on a Tuesday, both of us with toddlers and neither of us with much else. My daughter Kara had taken a header off the little slide, and Sharon's son had run over to see if she was okay. This tiny boy patting my crying kid on the back, and Sharon and I got to talking on a bench, and we didn't stop talking for about 15 years. She was funny. That was the first thing about her, and it was a real thing. I don't want to take it from her even now. Sharon was funny in a way that made strangers feel chosen. She could walk into a crowded room and find the one person standing alone by the wall and make them feel, for 10 minutes, like the most important human being alive. It's a real gift. It's rarer than money. And for a long time, I was the person she chose to turn it on, day after day, year after year. And I'll tell you honestly, it was wonderful. Being Sharon Petrakis' best friend was like standing in a warm patch of sun. Everybody wanted to be near her, and she picked me, and I felt lucky about it every single day. For a long time, it was real. That's what I need you to hear before I tell you the rest, because otherwise, you'll think I was a fool the whole way through. It wasn't a con from the beginning. That's exactly why it took me so long to see what it became. We raised our kids alongside each other. Chickenpox and first days of school, and the year her son broke his arm, and the year my Kara wouldn't eat anything but crackers. We had a standing Thursday, coffee, her kitchen or mine, 10 a.m. for the better part of 15 years. There's one Thursday I think about more than the rest. My mother had just died, and I couldn't get out of bed, and Sharon let herself in with her key and made the coffee and sat on the edge of my bed and didn't say anything wise or useful, just stayed, for hours, the way I'd later sit on her bathroom floor. We were even then. We were the kind of friends who take turns being the strong one. I want you to know that because it's the thing that makes the rest of it a grief and not just a grievance. I didn't lose a debtor. I lost the woman who made the coffee the week my mother died. She knew how I took my coffee and which of my in-laws I couldn't stand, and the thing I've never told anyone about my first marriage. She also had a running bit, 20 years of it, about a woman at the pharmacy she'd decided was a Russian spy. There was no evidence. There was never any evidence. Every few months, she'd call me and say, "She scanned my loyalty card without looking at it, Mags. Trained. I don't know why I'm telling you that. It isn't part of anything. If you'd asked me at 40 who knew me best in the world, I would not have said my husband, God love him. I'd have said Shar, without a pause. Shar. That's what makes this kind of thing so hard to see while it's happening. You keep measuring the person against the 20 years of sunshine, and the sunshine keeps winning, right up until the day you finally add it all up and realize the sun set a long time ago, and you'd just been standing in the memory of the warmth. So when it started to go wrong for her, I didn't hesitate. Not for 1 second. That's the part I need you to understand before I tell you the rest. I didn't help Sharon because I was keeping score. I helped her because she was my person. And when your person is drowning, you don't stand on the dock doing math. You get in the water. The first night was 15 years ago, February. I remember it was February because there was ice on my windshield and I didn't scrape it properly. I just drove half blind through my own neighborhood because of the way her voice sounded. She'd called me at 11 at night. Sharon never called at 11 at night. She was a texter, a next morning person. So I knew before I even answered that something was wrong. And she was crying so hard I couldn't understand her at first. I just kept saying, I'm here, slow down, while I pulled my coat on over my pajamas. And when I finally understood her, it was this. Her husband had left, that afternoon, packed a bag while she was at the grocery store and was gone by the time she got home. And on his way out, he'd emptied the joint account, which she didn't discover until she tried to buy the kids dinner and her card was declined at the register with her son standing right next to her. The mortgage was due in 4 days. She had $40. And she was sitting on the floor of her bathroom, she told me, because it was the only room in the house where the kids couldn't hear her fall apart. I drove over. I let myself in. I had a key. We were those kinds of friends. And I found her exactly where she'd said. On the bathroom floor, back against the tub, knees pulled up, still in her work clothes. She didn't look up when I came in. She just said, in a small, flat voice I'd never heard from her, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I got down on that cold tile next to her, in my pajamas, and I did not say a single useful thing, because there is nothing useful to say, and I knew that even then. I just sat with her, for 4 hours, until 3 a.m. Her boy woke up once and padded to the door, and I heard her voice change instantly, brighten, become a mother's. Go back to bed, baby. Mommy's just talking to Aunt Maggie. And then crumple again the second his door clicked shut. That was the moment, if you want to know. Not the mortgage. That. Watching her hold it together for 8 seconds for her son and then come apart again. And somewhere around 2, when the worst of the crying had passed and she'd gone quiet and hollow, I took out my checkbook, right there on the bathroom floor, and I wrote her a check for the mortgage. $1,900. I didn't have $1,900 to spare. I want that understood, because it's the thing Sharon would spend 15 years forgetting. My husband and I were comfortable, a school teacher and a parts manager. We were fine. We were not rich. I was teaching 4th grade then, and I was 2 payments from owning a Corolla with 140,000 miles on it. That was the financial position I was in. $1,900 was the summer. It was the trip to see my husband's parents we didn't take. It was the kids' camp we said no to. I never told Sharon any of that. You do not sit on a bathroom floor with a woman whose husband just emptied her bank account and tell her what the rope is costing you to throw. You just throw it. She cried harder when I gave it to her than she had all night. And a few days later, a card came in the mail. Her handwriting on the envelope, that beautiful looping hand. Remember that card. It's going to matter more than anything else in this story, more than the mortgage, more than the 11,000, more than all of it. but I'll get to it when it's time. If you've ever been the friend who showed up, the one with the casserole, the spare room, the checkbook, the 2 a.m. phone call, and then watched the person you carried rewrite the story so that you were somehow the burden, hit like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments the name of someone who was there for you when nobody else was. Let's put some good ones on the record tonight. There's a new confession here every day. Here is the thing nobody tells you about lending money to someone you love. It is never alone. You give because they need it and you happen to have it, and the giving becomes a habit, and the habit hardens into a role, and one day you look up and you've been cast, without ever auditioning, as the one who has it handled. The steady one. The one who's fine. And steady people, I've learned, are the easiest people in the world to stop thanking. I don't fully understand why. Maybe gratitude gets heavy. Maybe it's easier to decide you'd have managed anyway. All I know is that I watched "You Saved My Life" turn into "She's always inserting herself." And I never caught the moment it happened. After the mortgage, it was the car. Her transmission went 4 months later, and she needed the car to get the kids to school and get herself to the job she'd taken at a department store. And she called me, not crying this time, just tight, embarrassed. And I said, "Bring it to my guy, I'll take care of it, pay me back whenever." $600. Whenever is a word I said a lot in those years. It's a generous word and a dangerous one. Then it was the deposit on the smaller apartment, when she finally sold the house she couldn't keep. First and last month, $2,200, because her credit was wrecked from the divorce and no landlord would take her without it up front. Then the electric bill in July, because you cannot have 2 kids in a Georgia summer with no air conditioning. Then the electric bill again in August. Each one was small, each one was a crisis. Each one came with the same soft promise. "The second I'm back on my feet, Mags." And each one I waved off, because waving it off was the whole point. Because keeping score would have made it a transaction, and it wasn't a transaction. It was love. It was what you do. And then came the big one. $11,000 over about a year when Sharon decided to start her business. Because Sharon had a dream, and it was a good one. She wanted to open a home goods shop, beautiful things, linens, candles, the kind of store where everything smells like a nicer life than the one you have. And she had the taste for it, she genuinely did. What she didn't have was money, or a business plan a bank would look at twice, or a single other person in her life who believed in it enough to fund it. She had me. I gave her the $11,000 in pieces, the way you boil a frog, a degree at a time, so it never once felt like what it was. $1,000 for the first month's rent, $1,500 for inventory, $600 here, $400 there, all the little things a store needs before it can open its door. It never once felt like $11,000 because it never once arrived as $11,000. It arrived as just till the weekend, and the second the register starts ringing, I swear, and "You're literally the only reason this is happening, Mags. You're my angel." And I ate it up. Being called someone's angel is a powerful drug for a woman who spent her whole life being the reliable one nobody makes a fuss over. The only reason this is happening. She said that to me one evening in her empty shop, a week before opening, standing on a stepladder, hanging her sign. And she wobbled. The ladder rocked on the uneven floor, and she grabbed the sign and laughed and called down, "Don't let me fall, Mags." And I said, "I've got you. I've always got you." And I did, both hands on the rails, me at the bottom, holding it steady, looking up, her at the top, hanging her name over the door. I've thought about that picture a lot since, not because it means anything clever, just because that's where we both were. I never asked her to sign anything. And that's the detail that made everything possible, the detail people always catch on. There was no contract, no promissory note, no interest, no schedule, no witness. 15 years of money, and I never once made Sharon Petrakis put her name on a legal document. Because, and I know how this sounds, asking your best friend to sign a loan agreement felt like an insult. Like I didn't trust her. Like I thought she was the kind of person who wouldn't pay a friend back. so I have nothing. And that was my doing, not hers. If you're waiting for the part of this story where I pull out a signed agreement and a lawyer and a judgment, there isn't one. I never protected myself, because protecting yourself from a person you love feels like a small betrayal, and I wasn't willing to commit small betrayals against Sharon. She had no such trouble committing large ones against me. But here's what I did have. Not a contract, something else. Something I didn't keep on purpose at first. Something I just never threw away, the way you never throw away certain things. And by the time I understood what it was, it had become the only receipt that mattered. I'll tell you what it is when we get there. Just know this, there was no loan agreement anywhere with Sharon's signature on it. But there was another piece of paper in her handwriting, and she had forgotten it existed. Let me tell you how the business did, because it matters. It did well. Genuinely, deservedly well, and I won't pretend otherwise, because the story only works if I'm fair to her. Sharon has real taste and real charisma, and once she had a shop, the first store my money helped launch, she made it sing. People walked in and wanted to live there. Within 3 years, the little store had a waiting list for custom orders. Within 5, she'd opened a second location across town, bigger, with a little coffee bar in the corner. And then came the magazine. A regional lifestyle magazine did a feature, Local Makers, Local Dreamers. And there was Sharon, photographed leaning in the doorway of her flagship, arms crossed, gorgeous and knowing, under a headline that called her a self-made local success story. My husband brought it home, actually. He'd picked it up at the dentist's office, all excited, said, "Look, Mags, it's Shar," and slid it across the kitchen table to me like a gift. And I read it. Self-made. I read it 3 times. There was a whole paragraph about her grit, about how she'd pulled herself up. My husband was watching my face, waiting for me to be happy, and I made myself smile, and I said, "That's wonderful." And I meant it, and I didn't, both at once. Because I felt something I didn't have a name for yet. Not anger, it wasn't sharp enough to be anger. Something quieter and more hollow. Like watching a stranger give a tour of a house you built with your own hands, saying, "I always knew this place had potential," while you stand on the sidewalk you paid to have poured. Not one word about a bathroom floor. Why would there be? You can't be self-made if someone made you. The math of that story requires that the person holding the ladder never existed. I told myself it didn't matter. She was busy. Success is busy. The Thursday coffees had stopped by then. She was scaling. She had staff. She had a life that no longer had a standing slot in it for the woman who'd sat on her bathroom floor. I understood. I'm a reasonable person. I told myself all the reasonable things. But the money never came back, not a dollar of it. And more than the money, this is the part that started to sit wrong. The thank yous stopped too. Not just the repayment, the acknowledgement. Somewhere in the story Sharon was telling about her own life, the part where a friend emptied her vacation fund onto a bathroom floor at 3 in the morning had quietly disappeared. That was when something in the friendship started to close. I don't mean she stopped speaking to me. It was subtler and crueler than that. What Sharon did, and I only pieced this together slowly over a couple of years from things people said, was she began, gently, to edit me, to recast me. The first time I caught it, I was at a dinner party, and a woman I'd just met heard my name and winced. A small, sympathetic wince, the kind you make about someone who's a bit of a handful. "Oh, you know Sharon," she said warmly. "She's so loyal, she never gives up on people." And I sat there with a smile on my face, understanding, slowly, that I had been installed in this stranger's mind as one of Sharon's charity projects. A hard-luck friend that generous Sharon was too big-hearted to cut loose. Sharon. Too kind to abandon. Me. She'd taken the single most generous thing I'd ever done for another human being and turned it inside out, and now she wore it as a story about her own kindness to me. And she told it often enough that it calcified into fact. I need to tell you about the moment I stopped being able to explain it away. because up until this moment, I was still making excuses for her, still telling myself she was busy, she was stressed, she didn't mean it. It was my daughter Kara who finally broke it open. Kara is 26 now, the toddler from the slide, all grown up, and she'd spent her whole childhood calling Sharon Aunt Shar, sleeping over at her house, getting birthday cards with $20 in them that, I realized later, I had probably funded without knowing it. She came to me one afternoon looking like she'd swallowed something sharp and couldn't get it up or down. She'd run into Sharon at a coffee shop downtown, the two of them in line, and they'd hugged, and it had been fine and warm and Aunt Sharish. Sharon asking about Kara's job, Kara's boyfriend, all of it. That gift of hers for making you feel like the only person in the room, until Sharon asked how I was doing. And Kara said I was good, I was great, and Sharon got this look. Kara did an impression of it for me, this soft, sad, concerned look. And Sharon lowered her voice and said, "You know, sweetheart, between us, keep an eye on your mom about money. She's always been a little strange about it, always has been. I've had to set some boundaries there over the years, for my own peace. It's sad, honestly. I love her, but..." And then she'd let the "but" just hang there, the way you do when you want someone to fill in the worst version themselves. I've had to set some boundaries, about money, with me. Kara said, "Mom, I almost said something. I almost told her exactly what I know, but I didn't know if you'd want me to." Kara stood in my kitchen, and she was shaking. She's not a dramatic girl, my Kara. She runs the numbers at a logistics company. She's steady. She doesn't cry easily. But she was crying now, angry tears, the kind that make a person furious that they're crying. "Mom, I know what she did," she said. "I know about the mortgage. You told me the mortgage story when I was in high school. I sat there in that coffee shop and I let Aunt Shar tell me to watch you about money, and I said nothing, because I was so shocked I couldn't... Mom, I almost threw my drink at her. I should have said something. Why didn't you ever say something? Why did you let her..." And she looked at me, my daughter, 26 years old and vibrating with a fury I'd never let myself feel, waiting to see what I was going to do with a friend who'd just tried to turn my own child against me while sitting on my money and a rescue she'd erased. I took her hands across the counter. They were still shaking. And I said, "No, sweetheart, don't say anything, not yet." Because right then, standing in my kitchen with my furious daughter, I understood two things at once. The first was that Sharon had to be answered, not mainly for the money, but for what she was doing to the truth. The second was that I was not going to do it in a coffee shop or a group text or a screaming phone call. I was going to do it once, cleanly, in the last place she'd ever expect, and I was going to do it with the one thing she'd forgotten I had. Now here's where I take you back to the thing I've been holding, because you've been patient, and it's time. The card. That first night, 15 years ago, after I wrote the mortgage check on her bathroom floor, a few days later, a card came in the mail. A little watercolor card, flowers on the front, the kind you buy in a drugstore rack for $1.99. And inside, in Sharon's handwriting, Sharon has beautiful handwriting, looping and confident, she'd written me a note. A long one. Both sides of the card, her pen pressing hard the way it does when someone means every word. I'm not going to read you the whole thing yet. You'll hear it when Sharon hears it, which is the only fair way to do this, because part of what I need you to feel is the thing she felt at that register, and you can't feel it if I spend it early. So I'll tell you only this much for now. It opened with my name and 3 words under it. And the 3 words were, "You saved us." That's all you get for now. Hold on to it. Because those 3 words, and everything under them that I'm not reading yet, are the entire reason this story ends the way it does. I kept that card. And this is the part that matters most. The part that makes it a story about who I am, and not just about who she turned out to be. I did not keep it as a receipt. I want that understood. I didn't file it away thinking someday I'll need this. I kept it because at the time, in that February, it was one of the most beautiful things another human being had ever written to me. A woman I loved had told me, in her own hand, exactly what that night had meant to her, and promised me, in writing, what she'd do about it someday. Do you know what a note like that is worth to the reliable one, the steady one, the person everyone assumes is fine? It's worth more than the $1,900. It's worth more than all of it. So I put it inside a book on my nightstand, and it lived there for 15 years. And here's the thing that still stops my breath. Every single time Sharon rewrote me, that card sat there in the dark telling the first version. When the magazine called her self-made, the card was on my nightstand. When my own daughter came home shaking because Aunt Shar told her to watch her mother around money, the card was 15 feet away, in Sharon's own handwriting, in words she'd forgotten she ever wrote. She'd forgotten, but the card hadn't. That's the thing about people who rewrite the past. They get so good at the new version they forget they signed the first draft. The whole time Sharon was rewriting our history, telling everyone I was the jealous, money-obsessed hanger-on she was too kind to cut loose. The whole time, there was a card in a book on my nightstand, in her own looping, confident handwriting, that said the exact opposite. Word for word, the exact opposite. I'll read it to you when she reads it, not before. The grand opening was for her third store. Third. The business that started with the store my money helped open had 3 locations now, and the flagship, the big new one, the one with the good lighting and the exposed brick, was having a grand opening gala, invitation only, 200 people, local press, a banner with Sharon Petrakis in 3-foot letters. And I was invited. Of course I was invited. Sharon needed me there, as proof that all her success hadn't changed her, that she still kept her oldest friends close. So Sharon could tilt her head toward me at some point and tell a reporter, "That's Maggie. We go back 20 years. I never forget where I came from." I almost didn't go. Kara begged me not to. My husband thought it was a bad idea. But I went. I parked down the block and walked up to that flagship store and stood on the sidewalk for a second, looking at it. The good lighting, the exposed brick, 200 people inside holding champagne. Somewhere under all of it was $1,000 of first month's rent I'd written a check for on an ordinary Tuesday years ago. You can't see money once it becomes a building. That's the whole trouble with helping someone, and I brought the Orchid. Because even then, even knowing what I knew, I could not show up to my friend's big night empty-handed. It's the exact quality she'd spent 15 years spending, and I put the card in my purse. Before I did, and I only thought to do this because Kara made me, standing in my kitchen, still shaking, I took a photo of it, both sides, and sent it to my daughter. "Just in case," Kara said. She was right to. But I put the real card in my purse. Not as a plan, I want that understood, because it matters for who I am. I hadn't decided to use it. I'd decided only that if the moment came, if she gave me no other choice, I'd have the truth on me. I brought it the way you bring an umbrella when the sky looks uncertain. I was still hoping I wouldn't need it. I was still hoping that on the night her third store opened, some flicker of the woman who wrote that card would look across the room and remember who held the ladder. She did not. The speeches started around 9. Sharon stood up under her banner, glowing, gorgeous, holding her champagne, and she told the room her story. The self-made story. The one where she'd built it all from nothing with grit and taste and the occasional hard lesson about which people to keep in your life. And it was going fine. It was the usual thing, right up until a woman near the front, some new friend, called out warmly, "Tell them about your worst days, Cher. Tell them how far you've come." And Sharon smiled, and she got a little rueful, a little brave, the way you rehearse in a mirror, and she said, "Oh, the worst days." She let it land. She was good at this. You know, when you come from nothing, and I came from nothing, you learn who's really with you. You learn who's in your corner when there's nothing in it for them. A murmur of agreement. And then she brought it home. And this time, she did the thing I never saw coming, the thing that turned a bad night into the night. She said my name. "You have to understand," she said. "Some people just can't handle it when you rise. My oldest friend in the world, Maggie, she's here tonight. I love her to death. But I'll be honest with you, because we're all friends here." She gave a little rueful laugh. Maggie was always a little obsessed with money. Even back when we had nothing, always keeping some kind of tally. And some people, no matter how much you love them, just cannot be happy for you when it's finally your turn. The hardest lesson I ever learned, in business and in life, was that sometimes you have to set a boundary with the people you love the most, even when it breaks your heart. She actually put her hand on her chest when she said, "breaks your heart." And the room made a warm, sympathetic murmuring sound, a whole ballroom of people feeling for brave, wounded, self-made Sharon, who'd had to rise above the jealous friends who couldn't be happy for her. Somebody near the front said, "Aw." Somebody raised a glass, and I stood by the gift table with my orchid, and I felt the whole shape of 15 years click into its final position, and I understood that she was never going to remember. She was going to stand there, on a floor I paid for, and grieve out loud the burden of friends like me. So here is what I did. And I need you to notice what I did not do, because the not doing is the entire thing. I did not walk up to that microphone. I did not grab it out of her hand and read dates and dollar amounts to 200 people and a reporter with a notepad. I did not shout that part of that first store had come out of my summer vacations. I did not become, in that room, on that night, the exact woman she had just finished describing. The bitter old friend, obsessed with money, who couldn't let her have her moment. Because that was the trap, whether she'd built it on purpose or stumbled into it. The second I raised my voice, I would prove her right. A loud defense after that speech would have looked exactly like jealousy. She'd built a room where my truth, shouted, would sound like her lie. The only thing that could survive that room was quiet. So I gave it quiet. I went to the restroom because that's where women go when they need 90 seconds alone in a building full of people. There was a woman in there redoing her lipstick who told me, unprompted, all about how hard it had been to park, and I listened to the whole thing and said, "Oh, that's awful," in the right places. Then she left. I stood at the sink and opened my purse and looked at the card. Soft at the corners from living in a book. And I thought about putting it back and going home and letting her have the night. I genuinely did. Then I thought about my daughter's hands shaking in my kitchen. And I closed my purse and went back out to the party. I stayed. I was pleasant. I let her have her speeches and her applause and her awe from the crowd. I ate 2 of the little crab things off a passing tray, and then a third one. They were very good. I don't know what that says about me, standing there eating crab puffs 20 minutes after what she'd said. But it's what happened. And I've stopped pretending grief looks the way it's supposed to. And I learned, over the next half hour, exactly what a speech like that does to a room. A woman I'd met twice found me by the drinks table and touched my arm and said, with enormous kindness, "It's so good of you to come tonight. So good of you to come." As though I'd made a generous effort to attend the celebration of a woman who just publicly diagnosed me. A man asked me what I did, and when I said I taught 4th grade, he said, "Oh, that's wonderful, that's so important," in the voice you use for people you've decided to be gentle with. Nobody was cruel. That's what I want you to understand about rooms like that. Everyone was lovely to me, in the specific, careful way you're lovely to a person you've just been told is a little sad and a little bitter and a little obsessed with money. I could feel Sharon's story settling over me like a coat somebody else had picked out. And near the end of the night, when the press had gone and the crowd had thinned, and Sharon was standing by the register, the shiny new register in the flagship of the business that began with a check I wrote on a bathroom floor, I walked over, unhurried, Orchid in one hand, and in the other, held down at my side where no one could see it yet, the card. "Sharon," I said, "beautiful night. I wanted to give you something before I left." And I held out the card. She took it the way you take something from a person you've quietly filed under beneath you. Barely looking, one eye still on her guests, a little performance of graciousness for the cluster around her. "Oh, Maggie, you didn't have to. That's so sweet," already half turning back to her conversation. And then she opened it. And she saw the watercolor flowers on the front, faded now, soft with 15 years of sitting in a book. And I watched the exact half-second her brain registered the flowers as familiar without yet knowing why. And then she opened it the rest of the way, and she saw the handwriting inside, and she saw that it was her own. I watched her face. I only let myself watch it for a few seconds because I am not a cruel woman, and there is a hard limit on how long you can stand to watch another human being understand what they've done. But those few seconds I will keep for the rest of my life. Her eyes hit the handwriting and snagged, that little electric jolt you get seeing your own hand where you didn't expect it. And then, helplessly, the way you cannot not read your own writing, she read it. And now I'll tell you what it said, because now Sharon was reading it too, for the first time in 15 years, and we were finally reading it together. It said, "Maggie, I don't have the words. You are the only person who didn't look away. I will never forget this, and I will never forget that it was you. When I get back on my feet, and I will because of you, the first thing I do will be to pay you back every cent, and the second thing will be to spend the rest of my life being to someone else what you were to me tonight. I love you. You saved us. Shar." I watched her eyes move down her own handwriting, line by line, to the very bottom. You saved us. In her own beautiful, looping hand. On the night she had stood under her own banner and told 200 people that I was a jealous woman who'd always been obsessed with money. Her face did something I had never seen it do in 22 years. It stopped performing. For just a moment, there was no version, no story, no warm spotlight she was aiming at anyone. There was just Sharon and the truth, alone together in her own handwriting, with nowhere left to go. Her eyes came up and found mine, and I saw her understand that I had had this the whole time, through the magazine, through the dinner parties, through whatever she'd said to my daughter in a coffee shop. The whole time she was rewriting me, I'd been holding the first draft, and I'd never once used it. Not until she stood under a banner and made me. There was nothing she could say that her own handwriting hadn't already contradicted, and we both knew it. The little cluster of people was watching now, curious, sensing something in the air the way people do. A woman beside Sharon glanced at the card, then at Sharon's face, then back. And the kind-faced man, some vendor, some supplier, someone who'd just heard a speech about jealous, money-obsessed old friends, said gently, "Cher, what is it, you okay?" And Sharon, to her small credit, did not lie in that moment. She couldn't. Her mouth opened and nothing came out. She just stood there under the good lighting, at her shiny new register, holding 15-year-old proof of the truth she'd spent 5 years burying, and she could not produce a single word. She, who always had the word, who could make a stranger feel chosen in 10 seconds flat. The gift had left her. For the first time in 22 years, I watched Sharon Petrakis stand in a room full of people with absolutely nothing to say. So I answered him, quietly, not a speech, just a fact, set down on the register like exact change. "It's a thank you card," I said. "Sharon wrote it to me 15 years ago, the night her husband left and cleaned out her account, and the mortgage was due, and she had $40. I sat on her bathroom floor until 3 in the morning, and I wrote the check that saved her house." The little group had gone very quiet. The vendor was looking at Sharon now, not at me. "It's a lovely card," I said. "I've kept it 15 years. I looked at Sharon, and I kept my voice gentle, because gentle was the only thing that would land. "I thought you should have it back. You seem to have forgotten you wrote it." I set the orchid down on the counter beside the card. "Happy opening, Cher," I said. And I turned to go. But here's the thing about doing it quietly, at a register, in front of 6 people instead of 200. Those 6 people had heard the speech too. They'd heard Maggie was always a little obsessed with money 20 minutes earlier, and now they were watching the money-obsessed friend hand Sharon a 15-year-old thank you card and walk away without asking for a cent. The vendor said, quietly, "Jesus." Just that, one word, into the silence. The woman beside Sharon had put her hand over her mouth, and a man at the back of the little group, I never learned his name, said to nobody in particular, "She said that about her 20 minutes ago." He wasn't even angry. He just sounded like a man doing arithmetic he didn't want to finish. 6 people is not 200, but 6 people at a party talk to the other 194. I didn't need to correct the room. 6 people were enough. By morning, the room would know, the truth traveling quietly from friend to friend, exactly the way her lie had for years. I walked out through her beautiful glass doors, past her beautiful banner, into the parking lot, and I did not look back once. I sat in my car for a minute before I started it. Then I drove home and heated up soup, because I hadn't eaten anything at that party except crab puffs, and my husband asked how it was, and I said long, and we watched most of a movie. And behind me, I have to imagine, Sharon Petrakis stood at her own register on the best night of her professional life, holding a 15-year-old watercolor card, learning that the truth is patient, that it keeps, and that it does not care in the slightest how many stores you own. The aftermath. 3 things: the practical, the painful, and the one that healed. The practical. I never got the money back, not that night anyway, and I want to tell you plainly that I never once tried. No lawyer, no small claims court, no demand letter, no group text, no confrontation. People in the comments are going to tell me I was a fool, that I should have chased every dollar with interest. And look, I remembered every dollar. I'm not saying I forgot or that I never wanted to be paid back. She'd promised in writing that she would. What I'm saying is, I never used the debt to measure the friendship. Sharon did. That was the whole difference between us. I never called it in, I never made her sign a thing. And you cannot take someone to court for forgetting they were grateful. There's no statute for that. There should be, maybe. There isn't. But here's what I understood, walking out past the cars of the people who'd said, "Aw," for her. The money had been gone the moment I gave it, and it had been worth it every time, because I was never buying repayment. The money was gone. What I'd done with it was still mine. Sharon could rewrite a lot of things. She could not rewrite that. She could keep the card. I'd handed it to her, and Kara had both sides saved on her phone. She could keep the card. She could not keep the story. I walked out ahead. Not in dollars, but in the only ledger that has never once told me a lie. The painful. It's the friendship, and I won't pretend otherwise. 22 years, most of my adult life, and grieving her has been the strangest grief I've ever carried. Because she isn't dead. She's 3 stores richer and very much alive across town, telling a version of my life to people who will never meet me. I didn't lose a debtor. I lost the woman who made the coffee the week my mother died. Those were the same person and had been for a long time, and I had known it somewhere underneath and would not look, because looking cost more than I could afford. You'll forgive a great deal to keep standing in the warm patch of sun. I did, right up until she stood under a banner and described my shadow to a room full of strangers. Denise called me the next morning. Denise and I are not close now, by the way. We text on birthdays. I thought that phone call was going to be the start of something, and it wasn't, particularly. That happens more than people admit. She'd heard, these things travel, and she asked me, carefully, if there had ever been any truth to it, the money thing, the difficult thing. And that's when I understood the full size of what Sharon had done, because Denise had known me for 20 years, and even Denise had half believed it. That's what a story does when it's told with enough confidence for long enough. It becomes the water everyone's swimming in, and nobody remembers getting wet. So I told Denise the truth, the bathroom floor, the mortgage, the ladder, the card. And there was a long quiet, and then Denise said, "Oh, Maggie," in a voice with 20 years of quiet apology folded into 2 words. And that was the first moment I felt the record begin, very slowly, to correct itself. And the thing that healed. It's the card, but not the way you think. A week after the opening, an envelope came in the mail. Sharon's handwriting on the front, that looping, confident hand, my name and address in blue ink. I want you to understand what that did to me, standing at the end of my driveway with the rest of the mail under my arm. because for one strange, weightless second, I was 15 years younger. It was February. There was ice on the windshield and a woman on a bathroom floor, and a card was coming in the mail from someone who wanted to tell me what I'd meant to her. My whole body remembered that envelope before my head caught up. That's what 15 years does. Some part of me was still that woman at that mailbox, and some part of her was still the friend who wrote to me. Then I opened it. It wasn't a card. Inside was a check, $11,000, plus a little interest she'd calculated herself at her own kitchen table. The business money, the part she remembered, the part that felt like a real loan to her, the $11,000 that built the store. Not the mortgage, not the car or the deposit or the electric bills twice, or any of the bathroom floor money that came before there was ever a store to build. None of that was in the number, because none of that had ever really registered with her as debt. She'd repaid the part that flattered the self-made story, the investment, not the rescue. The rescue, she'd apparently decided, had never happened. And there was a note. The note was short. It did not, I noticed, contain an apology, not a real one. It said, "Here's what I owe you. I don't know how to explain what I said that night. I'd appreciate it if we could both move on now. Here's what I owe you." As if the debt had ever been the dollars. As if a check could buy back the 15 years of, "You are the only person who didn't look away," that she'd spent so long pretending she never wrote. I looked at that check for a long time, standing at my kitchen counter. $11,000 in change, in her beautiful handwriting. The same hand that wrote, "You saved us," now writing, "Here's what I owe you," as if the two were the same size. And for one day, I thought about not cashing it. There's a version of me that would have slid it into the book on my nightstand, into the empty space the card had left, and let it sit there uncashed forever as some kind of proof that I was above the money. But I sat with that, and I realized it was just one more way of disappearing. One more time being the noble, silent, self-sacrificing Maggie who takes nothing. And being that woman is exactly the habit that let Sharon take everything for 15 years. I was done being that woman. Refusing the money wouldn't punish Sharon. It would just be me, one final time, insisting I didn't need what I was owed. So I cashed it. Every dollar. And then I did the thing the card itself had promised. The second thing, the thing Sharon swore she'd do and never did. I took the whole repayment, every dollar of it, and I started an emergency fund, small but real, for women in my county leaving bad marriages with nothing but the kids and $40 and a bathroom floor to cry on. The first grant went out 4 months later. A woman in the next county, behind on her rent, 2 kids. I never met her. I signed the check in my car in a parking lot and then sat there longer than I needed to, with the radio on, listening to a call-in show about property taxes. I called it the February Fund. I didn't tell Sharon. I didn't have to. Kara asked me, a few weeks later, if I felt like I'd won. We were in the car, going to look at a couch she didn't end up buying, and I told her the truth. "No, sweetheart, you don't win these." I just refused to let her version be the last one. If you've ever been the steady one and then watched that person rewrite you into the villain the moment they stopped needing you, you don't have to shout to set the record straight. Keep the thing that proves who you were. Not what you're owed. Who you were. There's a new confession here every day, and I'll see you in the next one.